Suffolk, September 1815. The ball had been announced 6 weeks prior, which was long enough for the county to form opinions and short enough to prevent them from becoming policy. The Duke of Ashworth was looking for a wife. Dukes looked for wives the way merchant ships looked for harbors, with a certain inevitability that made the process feel less like a choice and more like a docking procedure. What made it remarkable was the method. He was hosting a ball at Ashworth Hall, 200 invitations sent across 3 counties, with the explicit understanding that the evening was an audition. Lady Trevelyan, his late mother's closest friend, and the woman who had managed Ashworth's social calendar since his mother's death 8 years prior, had suggested the approach. She had watched him reject 4 suitable candidates in 3 years and had concluded that the conventional method was not producing results. "Let them all come," she had said. "You will know when you see the right one." He had agreed because he was 31, the estate needed an heir, and he had spent 3 years discovering that the conventional method produced women who reminded him of someone he was trying very hard not to think about. The invitations went out in August. Suffolk received them with focused attention and considerable interest, and 200 families began the serious business of preparation. Among those 200 invitations, 1 had not been sent. Séverine Danthier arrived at Ashworth Hall on the evening of September the 14th in a hired carriage, which was the first thing noticed about her, because no one arrived at a ducal ball in a hired carriage. The second thing was the veil, black, fine Brussels lace, covering her face completely, giving her the appearance of a woman attending a funeral rather than a ball. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue, well made, not new, and she moved through the entrance hall with the stillness of someone who had decided exactly what she was doing. The footman hesitated. She handed him a card. It bore no name. It bore the Ashworth crest, and beneath it, in a hand he did not recognize, a single line. "Admit the bearer." He admitted the bearer. She entered the ballroom at 9, 40 minutes after the dancing had begun, and stood at the south wall, near the tall windows, where the candlelight was dimmest, and she did not speak to anyone, and no one spoke to her, because no one knew who she was, and the veil made the not knowing feel deliberate. Lady Trevelyan saw her first. She noted the veil, the gown, the posture, the hired carriage visible through the window, and the card the footman was still holding. She crossed to him. She examined the crest, which was genuine, and the handwriting, which she did not recognize, and the instruction, which was in the form that only 3 people were authorized to use, and 2 of them were dead. The third was herself. She had not written it. Someone had obtained one of her blank cards, and the obtaining told her something important about the woman who had used it. She studied the veiled figure at the south wall and thought, with 40 years of instinct, that the moment this woman was waiting for was going to be the most important thing that happened at this ball. The Duke entered at 9:15. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that communicated authority before he spoke and communicated very little else. He moved through the room with social precision, greeting the Ashford family and their eldest daughter Clarendon, greeting the Pellingham sisters, spending his attention the way he spent everything, carefully, with a complete accounting of what he expected in return. He was 17 minutes into the circuit when he saw her. He would calculate the time later and be embarrassed by how precisely he remembered it. The veil caught the candlelight in a way that made the lace seem to move even when she was still, and the midnight blue was darker than anything else in the room, and she was standing with a stillness he recognized, not from this room, but from another room, in another year, in the life he had been trying to organize into a closed account. He stopped. A half-second. Lady Trevelyan noticed. The woman at the south wall noticed. And the Duke noticed that he had stopped, which was worse, because it meant something had broken through. "Who is that?" he said. Lady Trevelyan had appeared at his elbow. I do not know, she said. She arrived with your crest on a card, and no name. My crest, he said, in the form your mother used. He resumed the circuit, and his attention for the remainder of it was correct and complete and entirely performed, and Lady Trevelyan understood that the inspection was over and something else had begun. He did not approach her for another hour. He danced with the Ashford daughter and with the elder Pellingham sister, and he was aware, during both dances, of the south wall, the way a man is aware of a door he has locked and is not certain he locked properly. At 10:15, he crossed the ballroom. She did not adjust her posture or her veil or her position. She stood exactly as she had been standing for the past hour, with composed patience. She had known he would come. She had decided not to perform anticipation. You were not invited, he said. No, she said. Her voice. He heard it through the veil and through 18 months of careful structure, and the structure held for 2 seconds, and then it did not hold. Sovereign, he said. Your Grace, she said. The title carried no warmth and no hostility. It established distance while acknowledging rank, and the combination was exact enough that he understood she had rehearsed it. You cannot be here, he said. And yet I am, she said. He studied the veil, the lace that covered the face he had not seen since the spring of 1814, and had seen in every room he had entered since. The veil was not disguise, it was a statement. I am here, and you do not get to see me. The last time you saw my face, you did not deserve what you were looking at. Earn it. Something moved in his chest that he had spent 18 months organizing into stillness. Why, he said. She turned her head slightly, the movement visible through the veil as a shift in the lace's pattern against the candlelight. You are choosing a bride, she said. I understood that my presence might provide useful context. Context, he said. For the candidates, she said, so they might understand what they are applying for. She paused. And what it costs. The ballroom moved around them, 200 people in their careful orbits, and at the south wall, the Duke of Ashworth stood before a woman in a black veil and felt the organized stillness of the past year and a half begin to disassemble with the inevitability of a structure built on the wrong foundation. You should not have come, he said, and his voice had dropped below the formal register into something that had no register at all. You should not have sent me away, she said, and the quality of her voice through the veil was the thing he had been afraid of, not anger, not grief, but the absolute clarity of a woman who had processed what had happened to her and had arrived at conclusions he was not going to enjoy hearing. The veil between them was Brussels lace, worth perhaps 3 guineas and 18 months of silence, and a decision he had made in a study at midnight that he had called duty, and she had called something else entirely. What had happened between them was this. 18 months earlier, in the spring of 1814, Séverine Danthier had been the daughter of Emmerich Danthier, a merchant of Ipswich, whose fortune was built in Baltic timber, and whose social position had been built on the fortune with patient determination, the understanding that money bought proximity, but only time bought acceptance. She had been 22, educated beyond her station by a father who believed education was a ladder, not a station. Through Lady Trevelyan's arrangement, she had attended a spring house party at Ashworth Hall. The Duke had noticed her on the first evening when she said something about Baltic shipping routes that was both technically precise and conversationally elegant. Over 4 days they had talked in the library and the garden, and on a walk along the Ashworth Lake that lasted 2 hours, and covered subjects from estate management to the way light moved across Suffolk water in April. She had been direct with him in a way no one was direct with him, and he had found this the most compelling thing he had encountered in 3 years. On the 4th evening, in the library, He had kissed her. She had kissed him back. It had been the kind of kiss that reorganizes a person's understanding of what they have been doing with their time. Then the wound. He had gone to his study that night and thought about Emmerich Danthier's timber fortune and Sevrain's position in society, which was not a position at all by the standards of his title. He had thought about Lady Constance Fenmore, whom he had been expected to marry since he was 19, and the 400 years of Ashworth name. And at midnight, alone, choosing between what he wanted and what he believed he owed, he had chosen what he believed he owed, and called it duty. The next morning, in the garden, in the April light that made everything look honest, he had told Sevrain the library had been a mistake, that the difference in their positions made any attachment impossible. She had understood that he was not saying what he meant. He was saying what he had decided to mean. "You are not sorry," she had said. "You are afraid. And the afraid is not of me. It is of what choosing me would say about you to the people whose opinions you have organized your life around." His silence had been the answer. She had left Ashworth Hall that morning without making a scene. She had packed, thanked Lady Trevelyan, and departed in her father's carriage. And the departure had been so precisely executed that most of the house party had not realized anything had occurred. Lady Constance Fenmore had married a Berkshire baron that autumn, removing even the justification he had used. He had told himself for 18 months that he had done the right thing, and the telling had become quieter with each repetition. And now she was standing at the south wall of his ballroom, and the telling had stopped entirely. "You began the choosing 18 months ago," she said. "You simply chose wrong." She turned and moved toward the garden doors, and the ballroom did not notice her leaving, because the veil's final purpose was not to hide her from the room, but to make her visible only to him. Lady Trevelyan appeared. "You know her," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," he said. "I know her." The ball concluded at midnight. 200 guests departed with their calculations intact, and none of them knew that the choosing had been disrupted by 6 sentences from a woman in a black veil. Lady Trevelyan remained. They sat in the library after midnight. The house felt like a large building settling back into itself after accommodating more people than it preferred. "She was at the spring house party," Lady Trevelyan said. "Her name is Sevrain Danthier." "What did you do?" she said. The question was direct in the way Lady Trevelyan's questions always were, without social padding. "I sent her away," he said, "because she is Emmerich Danthier's daughter. Because the position requires a particular kind of match." He paused. "Because I was a coward. And I dressed the cowardice in the language of duty, and I believed the costume, and she did not." Lady Trevelyan studied the man she had known since he was 7, who had made the wrong decision at midnight, and known it was wrong, and made it anyway. Because the weight of the portraits was heavier than the weight of the woman, and he had not yet learned that portraits do not keep you warm at night. "What will you do?" she said. "I do not know where she is staying," he said. "I imagine," Lady Trevelyan said, with the measured care of a woman placing a card she had been holding for 18 months, that a letter addressed to Emmerich Danthier's house in Ipswich would reach her by Thursday. "I imagine that whether you write it is the first honest decision you will have made in a year and a half." At the door, she turned. The ball was a fine idea. The execution was excellent. The premise was flawed. He sat in the library with the fire and the portraits and the word flawed, and he did not write the letter that night. He sat with the thought of it until the fire burned low and the September night pressed against the windows. He wrote it in the morning. The letter took 3 drafts. The first was too formal, the language of a duke addressing a situation that required management. The second was too honest, the language of a man at 2 in the morning who has stopped pretending. The third was 5 lines. "Miss Dantier, I find that the ball did not accomplish what I designed it to accomplish. I find that the design was the problem. I would like to speak with you if you are willing. I do not deserve willingness. I am asking for it regardless. Ashworth. Her reply arrived Friday, fast enough to mean she had not deliberated, and slow enough to mean she had not been waiting. Your Grace. The willingness is conditional. I will be at the Ipswich Assembly Rooms on Saturday at 2. Bring no title. Bring no carriage with a crest. Come as the man who sat in the library, not the one who stood in the garden. S. Danthier. He noted the conditions, which told him exactly what she had concluded about what had gone wrong. She was distinguishing between the man and the title, and telling him which one she was willing to see. He went to Ipswich on Saturday in a plain coat and a hired horse. The combination felt absurd for a duke and correct for the errand. The assembly rooms were a public building of adequate proportion and no distinction. She was already there. She was not wearing the veil. Her face. He had remembered it with accuracy, but the accuracy had been correct in every detail and wrong in the essential one. The memory had none of the living face's power. She was at a table near the window, 2 cups of tea. She had anticipated his arrival and prepared for it, and the preparation was practical rather than performative. I need to say something, he said. I was wrong, he said. I was wrong in the garden, and I was wrong in the study at midnight, when I decided that the correct thing to do was the easy thing, dressed in the language of the difficult thing. You told me I was afraid, and my silence was the truest thing I communicated that morning. What were you afraid of, she said, of choosing you, of what it would mean, of being the man who broke the pattern, of being happy in a way I could not justify on paper. And I chose the paper. You did not ruin me, she said. The word ruin moved between them with the weight of everything it meant in their world. You kissed me, she said. You walked with me in ways that were visible. Lady Trevelyan had arranged the visibility deliberately, and then you sent me away. The county drew its conclusions, that I had reached above my station and been corrected, that I had been tried and found wanting. My father lost 2 contracts in the months after. Men who had done business with him for a decade declined to continue. The reasons were never stated. In Suffolk, the silence does more damage than words. I did not know, he said. You did not look, she said. There is a difference, and the difference matters. She picked up her cup and drank. The gesture was ordinary, and the ordinariness was the point, the deliberate return to the practical in the middle of the painful. I did not come to the ball for revenge, she said. I came because I needed you to understand what it means to be in a room with someone and not be seen. Because that is what you did in the garden. You saw a category, not me. I am not asking you to make amends. What was broken cannot be restored to its original condition. I am asking whether you are capable of seeing clearly now, because if you are not, this conversation has reached its conclusion, and we will not have another. I see you, he said. I have seen you since the first evening, when you talked about Baltic shipping routes, and I understood that I was in considerable trouble. Seeing is not sufficient, she said. Seeing did not prevent the garden. What would be sufficient? Time, she said, and evidence. I am not a woman who accepts arguments. I accept proof. She stood. I am in Ipswich. I am not leaving Ipswich. If you want to provide evidence, you will have to come to where I am. Good afternoon, Your Grace. Good afternoon, Miss Danthier. He rode back to Ashworth Hall with the single-word evidence, now his assignment, conducted entirely on her terms and her schedule. The evidence began with timber. In the 3rd week of September, the estate steward mentioned that the usual supplier had raised prices again, and that there was a merchant in Ipswich who dealt in Baltic timber at better rates. Neither of them mentioned the merchant's name. The Duke went to the Donthier warehouse on the quay. The warehouse occupied a long stone building on the Ipswich waterfront, built in the previous century and maintained with the careful attention of an owner who understood that a building's condition communicated something about the business conducted inside it. The timber was stacked in the yard with the organized precision Séverine had learned from her father, each species separated, each grade marked, the Baltic pine in its own section, with the particular amber quality that distinguished it from the English oak in the adjacent bay. Emmerich Donthier was 54, gray at the temples, with the hands of a man who had started his career loading timber himself and had never entirely stopped. He received the Duke in the warehouse office, which was small and practical and had a desk covered in invoices and a window that overlooked the yard and the river beyond it. He offered tea. He did not offer warmth. The distinction was deliberate. The hospitality of a professional conducting business and the reserve of a father who knew exactly what this man had done to his daughter. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. Every minute was professional precision, and every minute was also a father conducting an assessment he had no intention of making easy. He discussed the timber with thoroughness that exceeded what the order required. He explained the grading system for Baltic pine, the difference between first and second growth, the seasonal variations in supply from the Baltic ports. He was being professional, and the professionalism had an edge, the edge of a father making the Duke earn every minute of his time. The Duke listened. He asked questions that were informed enough to suggest he had prepared for the meeting. He did not rush. He did not mention Séverine. The not mentioning was correct, and Emmerich Donthier noted the correctness. The Duke ordered 16 lengths of Baltic pine for the east cottage framing. The price was fair. Emmerich Donthier did not discount it. The Duke did not ask him to. And the Duke of Ashworth had come in person, something dukes did not do, and had sat in a merchant's office on the Ipswich quay for 40 minutes, longer than any timber order required, and had treated the merchant with the respect of a man practicing humility rather than performing it. Séverine learned about the visit at dinner. He came himself, her father said, not a steward. He discussed Baltic pine as though it were the most important subject in Suffolk. How was he? She said. Careful, her father said. Not the careful of impression management, the careful of someone who understood he was being observed and believed the observation was deserved. He paused. He knew the difference between first and second growth. He had done his reading. She returned to dinner and did not ask further questions, because her father's assessment told her everything about the visit and nothing about what it meant. And the not knowing was the space in which the evidence would either accumulate or fail. In October, the Duke came to inspect the timber delivery at the East Cottages. Séverine was riding the lane that bordered them, a route she had ridden twice a week since she was a girl. She stopped because continuing past would have been avoidance, and avoidance was performance. Miss Donthier, he said, straightening from a joint. There was sawdust on his coat. Not his best coat. He had dressed for work rather than appearance. The corner joints, she said from the horse. Your carpenter is using a mortise and tenon. Baltic pine takes a tighter joint with a dovetail. The grain is straighter than English oak. The carpenter considered this. She is correct, he said, with reluctant respect. The Duke looked at Séverine on the horse with the October light on her face and the sawdust on his coat. And the moment was one in which she had demonstrated, without effort or intention, that she belonged in every conversation she entered, and the demonstration was simply her. Good morning, Your Grace. Good morning, Miss Donthier. She rode on without looking back, and the not looking back was not coldness, it was patience. And the patience meant the evidence would be judged on her schedule, and everything he did from this point forward would be measured against a standard he did not set and could not negotiate. October brought the county dinners. At the Crenshaw dinner, they were seated at opposite ends of the table and did not speak, but the 18 other people felt the weight of their awareness of each other. After dinner, he approached. "The dovetail joints were completed this week," he said. "The carpenter sends his compliments." "You came to a dinner party to tell me about joints," she said. "I came because I was invited," he said. "The joints are incidental." "The joints are not incidental," she said. "You are reporting evidence." "Yes," he said. "I am reporting evidence." "The evidence is noted," she said. She gave him nothing he had not earned. Not cold, not warm, but clear. The clarity of a woman keeping an honest account and not prepared to advance credit. At the Ashworth harvest supper, Séveraine came with her father. Emmerich Danthier shook the Duke's hand at the door. The handshake was brief and dry, the kind that transmitted information without warmth, and the information was, "I am here because my daughter chose to attend, and my attendance is not an endorsement. It is a continuation of the watching, and the watching is not yet finished." The Duke spoke with Emmerich for 10 minutes about timber supply and the drainage problem in the West Fields, and the conversation was conducted under Séverane's observation, which she did not conceal, and which both men were aware of, and neither acknowledged. She watched the quality of his attention to her father, complete and unperformative, the attention of someone listening because the other person was saying something worth hearing, not because the other person was the father of the woman he was trying to earn. And the distinction mattered, because Séveraine had spent her life watching men pay careful attention to her father for strategic reasons, and she could identify the difference between strategic attention and genuine attention, the way her father could grade timber, instantly and without doubt. The supper itself was a large affair, the harvest table running the length of the Ashworth barn, with tenants and county families mixed together in the way that harvest suppers required and county dinners did not. Séveraine sat between Sir Aldous Crenshaw and a tenant farmer's wife, whose conversation was entirely about the wheat yield and who was the most relaxing dinner companion Séveraine had encountered in 2 months. Later, in the barn doorway under the October stars, the Duke found her with a cup of cider. The night felt like late October in Suffolk, cold enough to sense the season turning, but not yet cold enough to drive people indoors. And the stars were bright and close and indifferent to the concerns of the people beneath them. "Your father knows more about drainage than my steward," he said. He suggested redirecting the outlet to the mill stream. "My steward has been trying to solve that problem for 3 years. Your father solved it in 4 sentences. My father solves problems," she said. "He does not care whether the problem is timber or drainage or a duke who has made a significant error in judgment." He was quiet. The cider in her cup was cold, and the stars were bright, and neither of them pretended this conversation was about drainage. "He has not forgiven you," she said. "But he is watching. The timber and the drainage, and the 10 minutes at the door were all noted. I come by it honestly. The requirement for evidence, I learned it from him. I am aware that the evidence is incomplete," he said. "Yes," she said. "It is." She studied him for a moment in the doorway, the man standing in his own barn, in a coat that had sawdust on the cuffs from the morning's work at the cottages, and she thought about the gap between the Duke who had told her in the garden that their positions made attachment impossible, and the man standing here, discussing drainage with her father. And the gap was the evidence, and the evidence was real, and the realness of it was the thing she was not yet ready to name. She left with her father. The Duke stood in the doorway and acknowledged silently the thing he had been too afraid to acknowledge in the library a 1.5 years ago, and the acknowledgement changed nothing and changed everything. Lady Trevelyan found him. "How is the evidence?" she said. "Incomplete," he said. "Good," she said. "Incomplete means ongoing. Ongoing is what we want." The November assembly at the Ipswich Guildhall was the largest event of the autumn season. 60 people, the full county. Severain arrived with Mrs. Harfield, a wool merchant's wife who had taken her under social protection, and with her father, whose return to county society after 3 years was noted by everyone who understood what it meant. She wore dark blue, a different gown, newer, and no veil. The Duke arrived and saw her immediately, not with the half-second pause of the ball, but with measured recognition, understanding that this room was where the evidence would be publicly weighed. Lord Pembrey was there, a Viscount, 46, whose title gave him authority, and whose character did not deserve it. He had perfected the art of the observation that was technically a compliment and functionally an insult, and he selected his targets with the instinct of someone who understood that cruelty was most effective when directed at people who could not easily respond. He approached during the interval, when she was standing with Mrs. Harfield and Catherton, a wool merchant attending his first social occasion since his wife's death. "Miss Danthier," Lord Pembrey said with the smile that preceded everything he did. "What a pleasure to see you out in society again." "Suffolk is welcoming," he said. "We value enterprise, fresh blood. Though one does wonder whether the enterprise is commercial or," he paused, "aspirational." In his mouth, with his audience and the history he was referencing, the word meant, "You are a timber merchant's daughter who kissed a duke and was sent home, and everyone in this room knows it." Severain felt the cut. She recognized it because she had been cut before by the county's silence and by lost contracts. She was formulating her response when she heard the voice. "Miss Danthier's enterprise," the Duke said, and his voice was the one that had 400 years of Suffolk in it and did not require volume because it carried weight, "is the reason the East Tenant cottages are standing in frames that will last 50 years instead of 20. Her father's timber is the best in 3 counties, and her knowledge of it corrected a framing error my own carpenter had been making for 2 decades. He had materialized at her right, having watched Pembrey circle for the same time she had, and having waited for the moment when further waiting would have been cowardice. The Danthier family has contributed more to the practical improvement of this county in 1 season than most established families have contributed in a generation." He paused. "I include my own in that assessment." Pembrey's smile collapsed. "Of course, I merely," the Duke said. "Naturally." And the word closed a door. "We are all pleased to observe Miss Danthier's return to society." He held Pembrey's gaze for 1 moment longer than necessary, and Pembrey excused himself with the fluency of someone who had been outranked and needed distance to recalculate. The room exhaled. The Duke of Ashworth had publicly and deliberately placed himself beside the timber merchant's daughter by declaring something about her family's value, something true and unarguable. Not defense. Fact. And the room understood his position without requiring him to make a declaration, and Severain was defended without being patronized, which was a very particular kind of intelligence. "You did not need to do that," she said quietly. He was talking to Catherton about wool, as though nothing had happened. "Yes," he said, between sentences about fleece weights. "I did." He came to the Danthier house on a Wednesday morning in November. Not the warehouse. The house. This was a distinction Severain noted immediately, because the warehouse was business and the house was personal, and the crossing from one to the other was a boundary he had not previously attempted. Her father was at the warehouse. Severain was in the parlor, reviewing household accounts with the focused attention she brought to numbers, the same attention she brought to everything. The maid announced him with the carefully neutral tone of a household servant, who understood this visitor was not a normal visitor. Severain set down her pen. She did not stand. The not standing was deliberate. She received him in the parlor chair with the accounts on the desk and the pen beside them. Miss Danthier, he said. Your Grace, she said. You are at my house. I am at your house, he agreed. I owe you something beyond the evidence, he said. The truth about the study. About midnight. I was not only afraid of choosing you, he said. I was afraid of you, of the way you spoke to me directly when no one speaks to me directly. Of the conversation at the lake where you said something about continental trade policy that I had to go and verify, and you were right, and the being right was not the problem. The problem was that I wanted to keep talking to you, and the wanting felt like a loss of control. I have been controlling everything since I was 23, and you were the first thing I encountered that I could not control and did not want to control, and that terrified me. So I chose control, the study and the portraits, and the decision that let me remain in charge of everything except the one thing that mattered. I was afraid that you were evidence that I was not the man the portraits required me to be. I was wrong about the portraits, he said. They required me to be honest, and I was not honest. And the dishonesty cost you your reputation, and your father his contracts, and me a year and a half in a house full of paintings that cannot hold a conversation, or correct a framing joint, or tell me when I am being a coward. The parlor was quiet. The Wednesday street outside was going about its business, with the indifference of a town that did not organize itself around ducal confessions. Séverine sat in the chair and considered the man standing in the center of her room who had just said the most honest thing she had ever heard anyone say. And the honesty was not comfortable. It was not designed to be comfortable. It was designed to be complete. Sit down, she said. He sat. The sitting was the first thing she had offered him since Ipswich, and the offering was not forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. I am not going to forgive you today, she said. I am going to tell you what the months since cost. Not the contracts. The other cost. I loved you, she said, in the library, on the 4th day, before you kissed me. The kiss confirmed something I had already decided. And when you sent me away, you did not take the love with you. You left it with me, and I carried it for a year and a half, and it was heavy, and it was mine, and you had no right to leave me carrying something that heavy alone. She held his gaze. That is what the veil meant. At the ball, it meant I am still carrying this, and you do not get to see what it looks like on my face until you have earned the seeing. The evidence has been good. It has been honest. It has been the kind that cannot be performed. But evidence is not the same as proof, she said. Evidence accumulates. Proof is the moment when the accumulation becomes sufficient. I will know when it is sufficient, and you will not, and those terms are not negotiable. I accept the terms, he said. She studied him across the parlor, across the tea and the accounts, and the small, honest room that was nothing like his library. Something in her expression shifted, not toward softness, but toward the possibility of it, the way a door can be closed, but no longer locked. Finish your tea, she said. Then I am going to show you the warehouse accounts, because my father has been undercharging you, and I intend to correct the discrepancy. You are going to charge me more, he said. I am going to charge you fairly, she said. There is a difference, and I find the difference worth preserving. December brought the frost and the quietness of a county settling into winter, and the quietness made the things that were not quiet more visible. The thing most visible in Suffolk in December was the Duke of Ashworth's hired horse on the Ipswich road. He rode to Ipswich twice a week. The regularity was noted by his staff, by Lady Trevelyan, by the county, and by Séverine, who noted it with the precision she brought to all accumulating data. The visits were to the warehouse, which was the official reason, and not a false one, because there was genuine business to discuss. The winter timber contracts, the spring building schedule, the question of whether Baltic pine or English oak was the better choice for the chapel restoration, which was a project the Duke had been postponing for 2 years and had suddenly decided to undertake. But the visits were also to the parlor. After the warehouse business was concluded, after Emmerich Danthier had reviewed the accounts and discussed the timber and shaken the Duke's hand with a handshake that was incrementally, almost imperceptibly warmer than the previous one, the Duke would find himself in the Danthier parlor with a cup of tea and Sévrain across the desk, and they would talk. They talked about timber and trade, and then about books, and a disagreement about crop rotation lasted 90 minutes and left him more invigorated than any conversation he had had in 3 years. They talked about the county road bill and about estate management and about the specific difficulties of maintaining Suffolk drainage in winter, and the conversations had the quality of two people discovering that their minds worked in complementary ways, his toward structure and hers toward solution. And the complementary quality was the thing neither of them commented on and both of them noticed. On the third visit, he talked about his mother. This happened unprompted, on a Tuesday afternoon when the December light came through the parlor windows at a low angle and made everything feel as though it were being remembered rather than experienced. He mentioned her in the context of the chapel restoration because she had been the last person to commission work on the chapel, and the mention opened something, and he talked about her for 20 minutes with the unguarded attention of a man who did not often talk about her and had not realized he needed to. Sévrain listened. She listened with the complete attention he was learning to recognize as her natural state, not performed, not polite, but the genuine focused presence of a woman receiving what was given and not wasting it. "Your mother sounds like a woman who would have made the portraits uncomfortable," she said. The observation was precise and entirely correct, and the way she had distilled 20 minutes into one sentence that captured the essential truth made something in his chest feel less like loosening and more like breaking open. "She would have liked you," he said, "because I would have argued with her about the chapel," she said, "and she would have found the argument more interesting than the agreement." "Yes," he said, "that is exactly why." The silence that followed was full, not the silence of the ball or the assembly or the garden. Every month and every conversation, the library and the lake and the kiss and the veil and the timber, all of it present in the parlor, all of it waited, all of it leading to this quiet, which was the quiet of something arriving. "William," she said. He stilled. She had not used his name before. She had used his title and his grace and the formal distance that titles provided. And now his name was in her father's parlor, and the sound of it in her voice was the thing he had not known he was waiting to hear. "Yes," he said. "The evidence is sufficient," she said. She said it with the same precision with which she stated everything, and the precision was the most beautiful thing he had ever encountered, because it meant she had weighed it, every piece, on her own scale, and the account was settled, and the settling was not soft, and wasn't grand. It was stated. He stood. He came around the desk. She stood, because this wasn't a conversation for sitting. They were close in the parlor, with the December light and the cold tea, and the accounts that were always on the desk. "I am going to kiss you," she said. "And it is not going to be a mistake. And you are not going to go to a study at midnight and decide otherwise. If you are not certain of that, tell me now, because I am not a woman who does this twice." "I am certain," he said. She kissed him. Not the library kiss, the one that had been discovery and surprise, and the beginning of something immediately ended. This one had the full weight of everything between the library and the parlor in it, every month and every silence and every piece of evidence, and it was deliberate and precise and unhurried, and when it ended, she kept her hand in his, and neither of them moved. "The accounts are still on the desk," he said. "They are always on the desk," she said. "I am a working woman. The accounts do not pause for this." He asked her on a Thursday morning in the parlor. He did not kneel. She would not have wanted him to, and he understood this without being told, which was itself a form of evidence. "I have conducted a thorough assessment," he said. "You are proposing by conducting an assessment," she said. "The facts are these. You are the most direct, most competent, most ungovernable person I have ever encountered. You have corrected my carpenter, revised my timber contracts, and charged me fairly for materials I was overpaying for. I have never been less secure. I have never been more certain. I would like to spend the rest of my life being corrected by you, not because the estate needs it, because I require it, because the version of myself that exists in your presence is the only version I am interested in being. You are asking me to be a duchess," she said. "I am asking you to be my wife," he said. "The duchess is incidental." She thought about what it meant to say yes to a man who had once said no to her, and concluded that it was neither strength nor surrender. It was choice. Choosing him now, on her terms, in her parlor, was the fullest expression of the thing she had demanded, which was to be seen. "Yes," she said. "I should mention that I intend to review the Ashworth household accounts within the first week, and the library needs reorganizing, and I am keeping the parlor desk. The desk is non-negotiable," he said, "as are you." Her father received the news that evening with the composed attention of someone who had been watching the evidence accumulate for 3 months and had formed his conclusion 2 weeks prior, waiting with characteristic patience for his daughter to reach the same conclusion on her own schedule. "The Duke," he said. "The man who told you the difference in your positions made attachment impossible. He has revised that position," she said. Her father studied her. He studied her face, the look she wore when she had completed a negotiation that produced the outcome she wanted, and beneath it, something that wasn't negotiation, that was simply his daughter, being happy in the way that only his daughter could be happy, completely and without performance. "Is he good enough?" her father said. "He is trying to be," she said. "The trying is genuine, and the genuine is what I require." Her father nodded. He picked up the evening accounts. He set them down. "Your mother would have had opinions about this. My mother had opinions about everything." "She did," he said, "and she was usually right." He paused. "As are you." He returned to the accounts. Séveraine sat across from him in the parlor she was not giving up, and thought about a woman she had lost at 14, and a man she had nearly lost at 22, and a choice she had made on a Thursday morning that was the most honest decision she had ever made. And she found that the honesty of it was enough, and that enough was everything. The engagement was announced in the 2nd week of January. Lady Trevelyan hosted the dinner at Ashworth Hall on the last Friday of the month. 30 people, the full county. The dining room, arranged with the precision Lady Trevelyan had brought to this room for 2 decades, understanding that tonight was the most important arrangement she had ever designed. Séveraine sat at William's right. She wore dark blue. She wore her mother's pearl brooch at her throat, the one piece of her mother she carried to every occasion that mattered, simple and correct. William said, "The blue again." "It works," she said. "It does," he said, and picked up his wineglass and looked at her over it with an expression that had nothing of the managed Duke in it. Lord Pembry was at the table, Lady Trevelyan's doing. "Because it is better to have him where he must behave than outside where he will not," she had said. "And because watching him congratulate you will be one of the most satisfying things I have witnessed in a long career." "I find I am not above it either," Séveraine had said, and Lady Trevelyan had looked at her with the delighted satisfaction of someone who had been waiting a very long time for a Duchess of Ashworth she could genuinely enjoy, and had found one. The dinner proceeded. Sir Aldous was warm. Mrs. Harfield was tearful in the way of a woman who considered herself partly responsible for the outcome and was not entirely wrong. Catherton, the wool merchant, who had been standing beside Sevrain when Pembry attacked and the Duke intervened, shook William's hand at the door with a grip that communicated something permanent about his revised opinion of dukes. Pembry congratulated them at the end of the meal. He said the correct things with practiced grace and no remaining options. He said them to William first, and then to Sevrain. And when he said them to Sevrain, she met his eyes with the composed directness that was her natural register, and the meeting contained everything that needed containing. William beside her said nothing. His presence was the statement. Later, at the tall windows overlooking the gardens where he had once told her it was a mistake, Sevrain thought about the assembly when William had stood beside her and dismantled Pembry's attack. She had been annoyed briefly, the annoyance of a woman who had been navigating difficult conversations since she first accompanied her father to a trade negotiation at 15. Then she had thought about how he had made it about the timber rather than about her. Not defense. Fact. She was not a woman who needed someone beside her. She had never needed that, and she had been right about that in September, and she remained right about it. But she had concluded, over 3 months of evidence and one afternoon in a parlor, that she could receive someone standing beside her without it diminishing the fact that she could stand alone. Those were not the same thing. She had been treating them as the same for so long that the distinction had nearly escaped her, and the distinction was the most important thing she had learned since the ball. William found her at the window. "The last time I stood at these windows," she said, "I was leaving. I am not leaving, not because you have earned it, though you have. I am not leaving because I choose to be here, and the choosing is mine, and it has always been mine, and you did not give it to me, and you cannot take it away. Stop looking at me as though I might disappear," she said. "I am extremely difficult to disappear. I have a desk." The corner of his mouth moved, the slight shift she had seen once before in the library, the one that preceded a smile he had not yet decided to release. "Come," she said, taking his arm. "Lady Trevelyan is waiting to tell us how she arranged all of this. She has been managing us since the spring house party," he said. "And we have been the game," she said. "We have been the outcome," he said. "The game was hers. The outcome is ours." They were married in March at the church between Ashworth and Ipswich, a beautiful church with good stone floors and an east window that caught the morning light in a way that made promises feel permanent. She wore dark blue. Emmerich Danthier walked his daughter down the aisle with the bearing of a man who had loaded timber at 19 and built a fortune by 50, and raised a daughter who could argue with dukes and carry a heavy thing for 18 months and set it down when she was ready. Sevrain walked toward William and thought about all the versions of the veil. The first at the ball, black lace, complete covering. "I am here, and you do not get to see me." The second at Ipswich, face bare, eyes direct. "I am giving you the chance to see clearly." The third at the assembly, no veil, face visible to the entire room, while William stood beside her. "They all see me." The fourth in the parlor, when she had said his name and the last internal barrier had lifted. She had thought about the fifth version and had decided it would not be a veil at all. She reached William. He looked at her with nothing of the portraits, nothing of the study at midnight, just the man who had talked about light on water and listened when she talked about shipping routes, looking at the woman who had come to his ball uninvited and demanded evidence and chosen him anyway. She did not lower her eyes. She looked at him directly, and the looking was the fifth version. "There is no veil. There is no barrier. This face is yours. Not because you earned it, though you did, but because I choose to give it, and the giving is mine." William held her gaze. He understood it completely. The vows were said. He took her hand with the grip that understood the difference between a right and a gift. The wedding breakfast was at Ashworth Hall. She talked with Sir Aldous about planting. She talked with Mrs. Harfield, who was tearful. She talked with Lady Trevelyan, who was exercising restraint about how well her arrangements had turned out. Her father found her in the late afternoon. "Well," he said. "He is happy," she said. "Are you?" he said. "I am," she said. "I am also going to restructure the household accounts by Friday, and I have identified 4 inefficiencies in the estate management: the kitchen provisioning, the stable costs, the tenant rent schedule, and a standing order for English oak that should have been Baltic pine for the last decade." Her father laughed, the full, genuine laugh of a man who had spent 24 years being proud of this person. "You are going to be a magnificent duchess." "I know," she said. "I intend to be." William found her in the East Garden as March light moved across Suffolk in the long, golden way that made everything look as though it were being seen for the first time. She was studying the rose beds with the focused look she wore whenever she had already decided what was wrong. "The roses," he said. "They are in the wrong beds," she said. "The climbers should be on the south wall. The color scheme has no organizing principle. The roses are yours," he said. "All of it. The East Garden and the chapel and the library and the accounts. Not because you married me. Because you were right. Because you have been right since the library. And the being right is the reason for everything since." "William," she said. "Yes. I came to the ball to make you see me. That was the veil. It was not a disguise. It was a demand. See what you lost. See what you did. See what is standing in front of you that you threw away. You see me now. I have known since the parlor, since you told me you were afraid of me, which was the most honest thing you have ever said. And the honesty was what I required, and the requiring is finished. I am not requiring anything anymore. I am simply here, with your roses in the wrong beds, and your accounts that need restructuring, and your life that needs me in it. Not because you need managing, though you do, because I choose this. I choose you. I chose you in the library 18 months ago, and you were not ready. And now you are, and I am, and the readiness is enough." He took her hand. She let him take it. The March evening moved around them, warm and unhurried, and entirely indifferent to whether any of it had been practical. And the answer they had both concluded was that it had been. Just not in the way she had told herself in September, when she bought a black veil and hired a carriage and went to a ball to make a duke see what he had lost. The best evidence, her father had always said, was the kind you understood better after you had gathered it than before. She understood this evidence completely.